Hi, today I'm going to be working on rehydrating some sourdough starter. How you doing, buddy? Doing all right? You hungry? All right, let's get you some food. You're going to need some dehydrated sourdough. You can order some online, or this one came from a friend of mine. So if you are lucky enough to have a friend like my friend Kathy, you can get that from somebody else. Some all-purpose flour, and then you're going to need water, and most of the time they suggest that you use filtered water simply because it's better if it's not chlorinated, but we're on well water here, so directly out of the tap is fine for me. And the water needs to be lukewarm, so around 110, 115 degrees. You're going to need a jar to start your sourdough in, and some kind of a lid that's not airtight. These are not airtight. You could also cover it with a cloth and a rubber band or a piece of plastic wrap. Anything like that will be fine. The first thing we're going to do is dissolve some of this sourdough starter in the water. So I'm going to add it to this plastic baggie. I'm going to want about 1/3 of a cup when it's all done, and there were 2 cups in here, so I'm just kind of guessing how much that's going to be. If there's extra, it's fine. And close the Ziploc bag. And at first I tried like crushing this with my fingers, and that didn't work as well. So instead, I'm just going to take a rolling pin and just crush up this dehydrated sourdough starter, just so it'll be easier for it to dissolve. I'm going to measure 1/3 cup of the sourdough starter. That was pretty accurate for just eyeballing it. And then I'm going to add 1/4 cup of the warm water and stir. Depending on your climate, depending on the sourdough starter itself, how much flour was in it originally, you might need more water for it to dissolve. So feel free to add a little bit more if you need to. It smells kind of like crackers. All right, I think I need to add a little bit more water to mine, but not much. I'm just going to eyeball it, just like that, just so we can get it all nice and dissolved. Oh yeah, that's definitely better. That's looking better. I want it to dissolve a lot more than it is. I'm going to let it set for a little while, and we'll come back and check it in about half an hour. While I was waiting for the sourdough starter to finish dissolving, I started a roast in the not crock pot, what are these? Instant pot. The starter is all dissolved and it's very, very runny. I'm going to add in 1/3 cup of flour and stir it in, and then I'm going to see how runny it is. At this point, I don't think we're going to need to add any more liquid at all. A lot of people do their sourdough starters by weight, and there's nothing wrong with that if you want to be very exact about it, but I just think about when sourdough got started hundreds of years ago. Nobody had digital scales, right? They probably were measuring with actual little cups or their hands or spoons. So I don't think that it needs to be an exact science where you have to weigh everything out. If you like to do it that way, feel free. You're just going to want to add an equal part of flour to liquid. Again, we're going to put the lid on, not an airtight lid, and I'm going to mark it on the outside, the level that it's at, with a rubber band so that we can see whether it rises between today and tomorrow, and then we'll come back and check it in 24 hours. You'll want your sourdough set in a pretty warm place. If it's like 80 or 85 degrees, it'll rise a lot faster, but even at room temperature, it'll rise. So we're just gonna wait it, and then we'll check it tomorrow. All those bubbles forming on the top, that's exactly what we want it to look like. Without discarding any of the extra, we're gonna feed this sourdough and let it set for another roughly 24 hours. Now, not only am I seeing bubbles in the top of the sourdough starter, but look at all that goodness. Starting on day 3, I'm going to discard all but about 1/2 cup of the starter, and then I'm going to increase the amount I'm feeding it to 1/2 cup flour and 1/2 cup water. Our house is kind of cold, so my sourdough starter wasn't rising until my husband suggested I set it on the heat mats that I use for seed starting. Oh my goodness, look at this. Perfect. On days 4, 5, and 6, I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to reserve 1/2 cup of the starter, and then I'm going to add in 1/2 cup of flour and 1/2 cup of water
Stir it up really good and then put it in a warm place to rise, and by day 7 it should be ready for baking. There are some recipes that call for the discard from the sourdough starter. I think like pancakes, muffins, things like that. But wait until you see what I'm gonna do with this. What are you girls running for? Is there a treat coming your way? They go crazy for this stuff.
Good morning. It's been about a week since I rehydrated those sourdough crisps, and I think this sourdough is ready to go. We're going to test it by dropping a little bit into this cup of water. If it floats, it's a go. Aha, look at that. Beautiful. Now that my sourdough is nice, bubbly, healthy, rising like it's supposed to, I'm going to take probably another week and keep feeding it daily so that I can make sure it's nice and strong and healthy. After that, I'll put it in the fridge and I'll just take it out about 2 days before I'm going to bake it, feed it a couple times to make sure that it's ready to go on baking day. Sourdough starter is a live culture and you need to take care of it just like you would an animal. Not just like you would, but you do have to take care of it to keep it alive. And so some people think that by naming it, then you're going to be more likely to feed and water it. Also, it helps when you have more than one sourdough going. You can know where you got it. If you name it and you keep track, then you know this one came from my friend Kathy, this other one came from my friend Trisha, this one is my rye sourdough, and so forth. I would like to introduce you to, drum roll please, Ranger. This is my sourdough starter named Ranger. How you doing, buddy? Doing all right? You hungry? All right, let's get you some food.
After my bread machine kneads the dough, I will put it in this Pyrex bowl. I wrap it in cling wrap and then I mark on the cling wrap with a permanent marker at the level of the dough. And then I bring it in here and I use the same heat mat to let the dough rise on. And you can see here that it has risen way past double. And then I'm just going to put it back in the bread machine for the baking cycle.
Look at all the air pockets in this. It's so yummy, tangy, wonderful sourdough. And it didn't take long or much work. Another recipe that I've really worked on to get it exactly how we love it is this apple pie recipe. You can click right here and you can see exactly how to make it, and it turns out great every single time. That's so good. So good, so